The obsidian floor of the High Synod reflected the starlight filtering through the crystalline dome above, casting long, fractured shadows that danced like ghosts of a forgotten era. In the center of the vast, circular chamber, the air was thick with the scent of burning heavy incense and the ozone tang of ancient energy fields that kept the council in hermetic isolation from the rest of the colossal station. This was the beating heart of the Ethelgardian Empire, a civilization that had spanned the stars for 10,000 cycles, a dominion built on the twin pillars of absolute aesthetic perfection and ruthless military supremacy. To the Ethelgard, war was not merely a political instrument. It was a sacrament, a ritualistic dance of plasma and void steel where the victor was determined not just by strength, but by the elegance of their conquest. High Exarch Valorous stood at the apex of the obsidian dais, his elongated, chitinous fingers resting upon the rim of judgment, a circular balustrade carved from the bones of the first leviathans his ancestors had slain. His multifaceted eyes, shimmering with the violet hue of high nobility, swept over the gathered assembly of warlords, technocrat priests, and star navigators. The silence in the room was not empty. It was heavy, pressurized, waiting for the decree that would end a century of peace and initiate a new age of glory. Valorous cleared his throat, a sound like grinding stones that echoed through the acoustic perfection of the hall. He gestured with a sweeping motion of his robe, which rippled like liquid mercury, towards the center of the room where a holographic projection hovered, a grainy, indistinct image of a star system on the very fringe of the known galaxy. It was a desolate place, devoid of the hyperlanes and trade routes that crisscrossed the Empire's territory, a pocket of space that had been ignored by the cartographers for millennia. Yet in that darkness, something had stirred. The projection zoomed in, resolving into a clumsy, brutish structure of unpainted metal and rotating sections, a primitive station orbiting a gas giant. Beside it drifted ships that looked less like vessels and more like industrial debris welded together by desperate hands. They lacked the sleek curves of Ethelgardian craft, the bioluminescent hulls, the singing drive cores. These ships were silent, angular, and ugly. They were human. They did not respond to the summons, Valorous announced, his voice carrying the weight of finality. 3 standard cycles ago, our Vanguard probe entered this system, the system of Sol, and broadcast the Imperial mandate. We offered them the privilege of submission, the honor of becoming a client species within the hegemony. We offered them the chance to kneel and be uplifted by our culture. And how did they respond? The High Exarch paused for effect, allowing the indignation to ripple through the gathered elite. A murmur of disgust rose from the benches, the sound of rustling silk and clicking mandibles. They sent a text-only transmission, no visual, no formal diplomatic preamble, no submission, just a string of binary data that translated to a single phrase: "Leave us alone." Laughter broke out in the upper tiers where the younger fleet commanders sat. It was a cold, sharp laughter born of disbelief. To tell the Ethelgardian Empire to simply leave was like telling a tidal wave to retreat or a star to cease burning. It was an absurdity that bordered on madness, but Valorous did not laugh. He raised a hand, silencing the room instantly. "We sent a second probe," he continued, his voice dropping an octave. "Armed. A destroyer-class vessel intended to demonstrate the consequences of insolence. It entered the system's periphery, it charged its weapons, and then it vanished." The silence returned, but now it was different. It was no longer expectant, it was confused. Ships did not simply vanish. They were destroyed, they retreated, or they malfunctioned. To vanish implied a lack of closure, a disruption of the natural order. "Vanished?" asked Kael'thas, the eldest of the fleet marshals, stepping forward from the shadows. His armor was a masterpiece of filigree and function, scarred from 100 campaigns. "You mean it was destroyed, Exarch? Let us not mince words." "These primitives got lucky, perhaps a minefield, a kinetic impactor we failed to track." "The telemetry simply ceased," Valorous corrected, his eyes narrowing. "Instantaneously, one moment the destroyer Pride of Amber was fully operational, its shields at maximum, its weapons locked on the primitive station. The next nanosecond, nothing, no debris field, no energy signature of an explosion, no distress beacon, just silence." Valorous leaned forward over the dais, his gaze hardening. "They did not listen to our offer, they did not respect our warning shot. And now they have insulted the Empire by denying us even the dignity of a battle report. They believe their silence is a shield. They believe that because they dwell in the dark, we cannot burn them out." Kael'thas slammed his fist against his breastplate, the sound ringing like a bell. "Then we shall light the dark, Exarch. If they want war, we shall give them the greatest performance the galaxy has ever seen. We will descend upon their muddy rock with the Grand Armada. We will paint the sky with fire and show them the true meaning of power. They are a species of mechanics and laborers. They know nothing of the art. They know nothing of the symphony of destruction. A solitary figure moved from the periphery of the room, distinct from the warlords and the politicians. It was Zelona, the prime archivist, her robes the color of deep space, devoid of the ornamentation that the others wore. She moved with a fluid grace, her presence commanding a different kind of respect, fear of the unknown. "Caution, High Exarch," she whispered, though the acoustics carried her voice to every ear. "Caution, Marshal Kael'thas, we have analyzed the background radiation from their system. It is ordered." "Ordered," Kael'thas scoffed, turning to face her. "You speak of their radio chatter, their primitive communications." "No," Zelona said, her pale eyes fixed on the hologram of the ugly human ships. "I speak of the space between their worlds, the vacuum itself. There are fluctuations in the gravitational constant of that system that do not match natural celestial mechanics. There are shadows that move against the light of their star. I have studied the records of the precursors, and even they did not manipulate gravity with such casual disregard. These humans, they are not what they seem." The transmission, "Leave us alone," may not have been a plea. It may have been a command. "A command?" Valorous laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "From creatures who build ships out of girders and bolts, from a species that has not even colonized the next star over. You see demons in the dark, Zelona. That is your job. My job is to expand the hegemony, and Marshal Kael'thas' job is to crush those who refuse us." Valorous straightened, the decision made, the fate of millions sealed in a moment of arrogance. "Marshal, assemble the Armada, not a task force, the Armada. We will not merely defeat them. We will overwhelm them with such magnificence that their history will end in a single day of awe. We jump at the next rotation." The assembly roared its approval, a cacophony of ambition and bloodlust. Zelona stood silent amidst the shouting, clutching her data slate, her heart pounding with a rhythm that felt like a countdown. She looked at the hologram of the human station one last time. It sat there in the void, rotating slowly, silent and ugly. And for the first time in her life, she realized that beauty was not a measure of strength. Sometimes, the most terrifying things in the universe were the ones that didn't care if you were watching. The Empire had declared war on a mystery, and they were marching toward it with banners unfurled and trumpets blaring, deaf to the silence that was waiting to swallow them whole. The journey to the Terran border was a spectacle of impossible grandeur. The Ethelgardian Armada was not merely a military force. It was a traveling court, a procession of radiant leviathans that shimmered with pearlescent armor and golden solar sails. The flagship, the Crown of Viridia, was the size of a small moon, a floating palace of spires and domes that housed the High Exarch and his retinue. Surrounding it were the battle cruisers, sleek and predatory, resembling deep-sea hunters made of glass and light. They moved through the hyperspace currents with an elegance that defied physics, their engines singing in a harmony that could be heard through the hull plates. To the Ethelgard, appearance was functionality. If a ship was beautiful, it was powerful. The asymmetry and utilitarian brutishness of the human vessels they had seen in the scans were considered proof of inferiority, a sign of a mind that had not yet grasped the higher truths of existence. Inside the war room of the Crown, Marshal Kael'thas watched the proximity counters tick down. The mood was electric. Young officers preened in their dress uniforms, betting on who would score the first kill, while artists set up their easels to capture the imminent victory for posterity. Valorous sat on his command throne, sipping a goblet of nectar, looking bored. "How long until reversion to real space?" he asked, swirling the liquid. "Moments, Exarch," a navigator replied, his fingers dancing over a holographic interface. "We are exiting the slipstream directly above the fourth planet of their system. We will bypass their outer defenses and strike directly at their industrial heart. It will be surgical." "Good," Valorous murmured. "Let us hope they have something resembling a fleet to meet us. It would be a shame to waste this much ammunition on static targets." The universe twisted. The sickening, familiar lurch of hyperspace reversion hit them, a sensation like falling upwards, and then the stars snapped back into rigid points of light. The viewports cleared, revealing the target system, and silence fell over the war room. Absolute, suffocating silence. They had expected to emerge above a bustling industrial world, perhaps surrounded by a swarm of those ugly, primitive ships attempting to form a desperate defensive line. They had expected panic. They had expected radio waves filled with screams and pleas for mercy. Instead, they emerged into a graveyard. The planet below Mars was red and dusty, scarred by ancient craters. but it was the space around it that froze the blood in Kael'thas's veins. There were no ships, there were no stations. There was nothing but a vast, glittering debris field of dust. Except as the sensors began to resolve the data, they realized it wasn't dust. It was millions upon millions of tiny, black geometric shapes, hovering in a perfect, equidistant grid that extended for light seconds in every direction. The grid encapsulated the entire planet, and as the Ethel Guardian fleet materialized, the grid shifted. It didn't react with thrusters or engines. It simply reoriented, like a school of fish turning in unison, facing the invaders. "What is this?" Valorous demanded, standing up, the nectar forgotten. "Where is the enemy? What are those specks?" "Sensors are having trouble locking on Exarch," a tactical officer reported, his voice trembling slightly. "The objects, they are absorbing our active scans. They are not reflecting anything. It's like staring into a void." "Launch fighters," Kael'thas barked, instinct taking over. "Clear a path. It's a minefield, a primitive static defense. Burn through it." The hangars of the great ships opened, and thousands of interceptors poured out, their engines flaring like brilliant sparks. They were fast, agile, and piloted by the elite of the Empire. They dove toward the grid of black shapes, plasma cannons charging. The first wave fired, bolts of searing energy lancing out toward the silent wall. And then the wall ate the light. The plasma bolts didn't detonate. They didn't deflect. They simply ceased to exist the moment they touched the perimeter of the grid. The black shapes didn't move. They didn't return fire. They just hung there, absorbing the energy with an indifference that was more terrifying than any counterattack. "Impact confirmed. No effect," the tactical officer whispered. "Energy absorption is absolute. Exarch the readings. The energy isn't dissipating, it's being stored." Before Kael'thas could issue a new command, the grid woke up. It wasn't a weapon firing. It was a shift in the fundamental nature of the space around them. The black shapes began to rotate, and suddenly the crown of Veridia lurched violently, not from an explosion, but from a sudden, crushing gravitational shear. The artificial gravity decks screamed as they fought to compensate. On the view screen, the smaller escort ships were being pulled out of formation, dragging sideways as if caught in an invisible riptide. "Gravitational anomalies detected," the navigator screamed. "Multiple wells opening inside the formation. They are manipulating the metric of space-time." "Impossible," Kael'thas roared. "That requires a stellar mass singularity. Where is the power source?" "The grid," Zelona's voice cut through the panic. She had moved to the sensor station, her eyes wide with a horrific realization. "The grid isn't a minefield. It's a lens. They are taking the solar wind, the background radiation, even the energy from our own weapons, and they are focusing it. They are using gravity as a loom, and we are the thread." "Fire all batteries," Valorous screamed, his composure shattered. "Destroy them, target the planet. If we cannot hit the ships, we burn the world." The order was given. The grand cannons of the Ethel Guardian Armada, capable of cracking tectonic plates, swiveled and fired. Beams of coherent light the width of city blocks erupted from the fleet. It was enough firepower to sterilize a continent. The beams traveled for 3 seconds. Then space itself seemed to fold. A few kilometers in front of the fleet, a shimmering distortion appeared, a geometric hard light barrier that wasn't just a wall but a redirection matrix. The beams hit the distortion and bent. They didn't scatter, they curved. They curved back. "Evasive," Kael'thas screamed, but it was too late. The Empire's own fire, magnified and refocused, swept back through their formation. It was a massacre of irony. The beautiful, pearlescent hulls of the forward destroyers vaporized instantly under the heat of their own aggression. Ships that had taken decades to build, crafted by master artisans, turned into expanding clouds of ionized gas in the blink of an eye. The crown of Veridia shuddered as a glancing blow from a reflected heavy laser shore through its port solar sail, sending the massive vessel into a slow, tumbling spin. Inside the bridge, chaos reigned. Alarms blared, sparks showered from overloading consoles, and the holograms flickered and died. Valorous was thrown from his throne, landing hard on the obsidian floor. He scrambled up, his robes torn, his dignity ash. "Why aren't they fighting properly?" he shrieked. "Where are their warriors? Where is their honor?" Then the communications console lit up. It wasn't a hail. It wasn't a request for surrender. It was a forced override. Every screen on every ship in the surviving fleet turned white. The static cleared to reveal a human face. It was not a warrior screaming in rage. It was not a general in a uniform adorned with medals. It was an old man sitting in a simple chair wearing a plain gray tunic. He looked tired. He held a mug of steaming liquid in one hand and adjusted a pair of spectacles with the other. The background behind him was a wall of books, physical, paper books, ancient and fragile. "I am Admiral Vance," the human said. His voice was soft, calm, devoid of any martial cadence. It sounded like a teacher disappointed in a student. "We received your declaration, we received your fire, and now we have neutralized your capacity to harm us." Valorous stumbled toward the screen, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. You use trickery. You hide behind mirrors and gravity traps. Come out and fight us like soldiers." Vance looked at Valorous, and for a moment the alien High Exarch felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of space. The human's eyes were incredibly sad. "Soldiers," Vance repeated. "We stopped being soldiers a long time ago. Soldiers die. Soldiers destroy. We are engineers. We are custodians." He took a sip from his mug. "You came here expecting a fight. You wanted a glorious struggle. You wanted to test your mettle against ours, but you don't understand. We don't fight battles anymore. We solve problems, and right now your fleet is a problem. We are the Ethel Guardian hegemony," Valorous spat. "We number in the trillions. You cannot stop us with a single trick. We will return with 10,000 ships. We will." "You won't," Vance interrupted gently. "Look at your sensors. Look at your engines." Kael'thas pulled himself to a working console. His hands flew over the controls and his face went pale. "Exarch, the drive cores, they are cold." "What?" "The fusion reactions? They have stopped. The containment fields are holding, but the reaction has been dampened. I don't understand. The physics. The strong nuclear force. It's as if the localized constants have been altered." "We have dampened the atomic motion within your vessels," Vance explained, as if discussing the weather. "We have created a localized entropy stasis field around your fleet. You cannot generate power. You cannot fire weapons. You cannot leave. You are effectively in a bottle." The realization hit the Valosians like a physical blow. This wasn't war. This wasn't even combat. This was pest control. The humans hadn't deployed a fleet because they didn't need one. They had manipulated the fundamental laws of the universe to simply turn the enemy off. "Why?" Zelona stepped forward, her voice trembling. "If you have this power, why did you hide? Why did you look so primitive?" Vance's expression softened as he looked at the archivist. "We don't care about how things look, only how they work. We spent centuries shouting into the void, looking for friends. When we found none, we realized the void was dangerous. So we stopped building swords and started building shields. We stopped painting our ships and started fortifying our stars. We didn't answer your hail because we were busy." "Busy with what?" Zelona asked. "Surviving," Vance said. "And now you are stuck here. Your life support will last for another 12 standard hours on residual battery power. After that, you will freeze. I'm offering you a choice. You can stay on your beautiful dead ships and freeze with your pride, or you can lower your airlocks, allow our transports to dock, and accept our hospitality. We have food, we have warmth, and we have a lot to talk about." "Surrender," Valorous hissed. "You asked the High Exarch to surrender to mechanics." "I'm not asking you to surrender," Vance said, leaning forward, the steel in his voice finally showing through. "I'm asking you to listen, because the thing we were busy preparing for, it wasn't you. You are a nuisance, the thing that is coming, the thing we built this system-wide shield to hide from. That is the real threat. And if you want your empire to survive the next century, you're going to need us." The screen went black. The silence on the bridge of the crown of Veridia was absolute. The hum of the engines was gone. The lights were dimming. The air recyclers were spinning down. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Ethel Guardian Empire was powerless. Kael'thas looked at his hands, then at the dead console. "He suppressed the strong nuclear force," the Marshal whispered, his mind unable to comprehend the scale of the technology. "They turned off the suns in our engines. They are gods." "No," Zelona said, her voice gaining strength as she looked out the viewport at the silent, black grid that held them captive. "They are not gods. They are men, and that is much, much worse. Gods demand worship. Men demand results." She turned to the High Exarch. "Valorous, we must open the airlocks." "I will not," Valorous screamed, though his voice lacked its usual fire. "I will not bow." "Then you will die," Kael'thas said, drawing his ceremonial sidearm. He didn't aim it at the Exarch, but the implication was clear. The hierarchy had shattered. Survival was the new law. "I will not let my crew freeze for your vanity. Open the locks." The docking process was a humiliation that burned worse than any defeat in battle. The human transports were ugly, blocky rectangles that clamped onto the sleek, organic curves of the Ethel Guardian ships like barnacles. They forced the airlocks open with hydraulic rams, ignoring the delicate electronic codes. Human Marines in bulky, unpainted power armor stomped onto the pristine decks. They didn't shout. They didn't wave flags. They simply pointed toward the transport shuttles with efficient hand gestures. They carried weapons, but they didn't brandish them. They treated the terrified alien crew not as prisoners of war, but as refugees to be processed. Valoris, Kael'thas, and Zalona were taken separately, transported to the massive station orbiting Mars, the Olympus Mons ring. Inside, the aesthetic shock was profound. There were no statues of heroes, no tapestries of conquest. The station was a labyrinth of exposed conduits, holographic data streams, and bustling activity. Humans of all shapes and sizes moved with purposeful intent. They ignored the high nobility of the Empire walking in their midst. To them, the aliens were just another variable in a complex equation. They were brought to a conference room with a view of the sun. But the sun looked wrong. It was encased in a shimmering latticework of energy collectors, a Dyson swarm in the early stages of construction. The sheer scale of the engineering made the Ethel Guardian fleet look like toys. Admiral Vance was waiting for them. He stood by the window watching the sun. He didn't turn when they entered. "Sit," he said. They sat. Valoris refused to look at the human, staring sullenly at the table. Kael'thas was looking at the datapad in front of him, which displayed technical readouts of the Crown's systems, readouts that showed the humans had fixed the damage they caused in minutes. Zalona, however, was watching Vance. "You said you were preparing for something," Zalona said, breaking the silence. "You said we were a nuisance." Vance turned. "You are an ancient empire, you value tradition, you value history, but your history is a local one. You've spent 10,000 years fighting over the same patch of the galaxy, trading planets like currency. You never looked out." "Out?" Kael'thas asked. "Outside the galaxy," Vance said. He tapped the table and a hologram sprang to life. It showed the Milky Way, a swirling spiral of light. Then it zoomed out, showing the local cluster. And then it showed the void beyond. In the darkness between the galaxies, there was a shadow. It wasn't a nebula. It wasn't a black hole. It was a distortion, a moving patch of nothingness that was blotting out the background stars. It was massive, millions of light years across, and it was moving toward the Milky Way. "We call it the Silence," Vance said quietly. "We detected it 50 years ago, deep-range subspace telescopes. It's not a natural phenomenon, it's a swarm. A biological or technological consumption wave. It strips galaxies, it eats stars, it eats life." The three aliens stared at the image. The scale was incomprehensible. The petty wars of the hegemony, the border disputes, the rituals of honor, all of it felt suddenly microscopic. "We did the math," Vance continued. "If we fought you, we would win, but we would waste resources. We would waste time. We calculated that if we stayed quiet, maybe you would ignore us. Maybe we could finish the solar shield before the Silence arrived. But you forced our hand. You came here and you poked the bear." "So you destroyed us to keep your secret," Valoris whispered. "We didn't destroy you," Vance corrected. "We stopped you, because now that you're here we have a new variable. Your fleet is useless against the Silence. Your lasers, your plasma, it won't scratch them. But your industrial capacity, your resource networks, your billions of citizens." Vance looked at them with a calculating intensity. "We need labor, we need raw materials. We have the designs, we have the science, but we don't have the manpower to fortify the entire sector in time. You do." "You want us to work for you?" Valoris sneered. "Slaves." "Partners," Vance said firmly. "We provide the shielding technology. We provide the entropy dampeners. We upgrade your ships so they don't just look pretty, but actually survive what's coming. In exchange, you stop playing dress-up and start helping us build the wall. We turn the hegemony into a fortress." "And if we refuse?" Kael'thas asked. "Then we send you back to your ships, we unlock your engines, and we let you go," Vance said simply. "And when the Silence arrives in 20 years, you will die. You will die beautifully, I'm sure. You will sing your songs and polish your armor, and then you will be erased. And we will survive behind our shields alone." The room was silent for a long time. The weight of the revelation pressed down on them. The arrogant High Exarch, the battle-hardened Marshal, and the curious Archivist were faced with a paradigm shift that shattered their worldview. They had thought humans were weak because they were quiet. They had thought humans were primitive because they were ugly. But the humans had simply transcended the need for validation. They had looked into the abyss, and instead of screaming, they had started building a lid. Zelona stood up. She walked over to the hologram of the approaching shadow. She traced the edge of the darkness with a trembling finger. They consume everything. Everything, Vance confirmed. Then the art of war is irrelevant, she murmured. The only thing that matters is the art of survival. She turned to Valoris. Exarch, the mandate is clear. The duty of the High Exarch is to ensure the continuity of the Ethelgardian race. There is no continuity in that shadow. Valoris looked at the old human, then at his marshal, and finally at the hologram. The pride that had defined his life felt brittle, hollow. He realized that for the first time he wasn't the protagonist of the story. He was a supporting character in a much larger tragedy. "What do you need first?" Valoris asked, his voice barely a whisper. Vance smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "We need helium-3, a lot of it, and we need you to stop shooting at our mining drones." The alliance that followed was not born of friendship, but of existential terror. The Ethelgardian Empire did not submit, but it changed. The decorative fins were stripped from their warships to make room for shield generators. The gold filigree was melted down to conduct circuitry for the massive planetary defense grids. The humans and the Ethelgard worked side by side, the stoic, coffee-drinking engineers and the tall, chitinous warriors. It was a friction-filled relationship. There were arguments. There were cultural clashes. The Ethelgard found human brutalism depressing. The humans found Ethelgardian rituals inefficient. But slowly, a respect formed. The humans marveled at the Ethelgard's ability to endure high-G maneuvers that would liquefy a human pilot. The Ethelgard marveled at the human ability to look at a problem that seemed impossible and simply fix it. 10 years later, the solar system was unrecognizable. It was no longer a collection of planets. It was a fortress. The sun was hidden behind a Dyson swarm that pulsed with containment fields. Mars was a factory world. And the Ethelgardian fleet, once a parade of vanity, was now a phalanx of deadly efficiency, their hulls matte black, their weapons tuned to frequencies that could tear apart atomic bonds. Admiral Vance stood on the observation deck of the Aegis, the massive station that now served as the Joint Command Center. Beside him stood Marshal Kael'thas. The alien had aged. His chitin was grayer, scarred not by battle but by tireless work. "The long-range sensors have picked it up," Kael'thas said, his voice deep and rumbling. "The leading edge of the silence. It will enter the outer perimeter in 3 days." "Are we ready?" Vance asked, staring out at the stars. "No," Kael'thas admitted. "One is never ready for the end of the world, but—" He tapped the console, and the viewscreen showed the combined fleet, human and Ethelgardian ships, thousands of them, moving in a perfect, deadly formation. It was a sight that possessed a new kind of beauty, not the beauty of ornamentation, but the beauty of purpose. "We are as ready as we can be, and we are not alone." Vance nodded. "They didn't listen at first," he mused, thinking back to that first day, "but they learned fast." "We thought you were weak," Kael'thas said. "We thought your silence was fear." "It was fear," Vance said. "Fear is good. Fear makes you dig trenches. Fear makes you invent new physics. Only fools aren't afraid." "Then we are no longer fools," Kael'thas said. He placed a hand on the human's shoulder, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. "Let them come. Let the silence come. We will scream back so loud the universe will shake." The alarm klaxons began to sound, a low, rhythmic thrumming that vibrated through the deck plates. The sensors showed the shadow deepening. The stars began to wink out one by one as the tide arrived. But this time there was no panic. There was no arrogance. There was only the cold, hard logic of survival and the fiery heart of a galaxy united against the dark. The human admiral and the alien marshal stood together, watching the abyss. "Weapons free," Vance whispered. "For the Empire," Kael'thas added. "For the future," Vance corrected. And the darkness was met with light.